Okay, well, it looks like we're at 12 o'clock straight up, so we'll go ahead and get started for today's Lunch and Learn. Today, our topic is the Processing and Research Buildings, PUREX, and the 324 building. And our speakers today are Joseph Lippold and Michelle Jones. And I'd like to just remind everybody that if you have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Or when we get done to the question and answer session, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you so you can ask the question yourself. And with that, I will share my screen and hand it over to Joseph and Michelle. Here we go.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. I'm Michelle Jones. I am the Facility Transition Project Manager with the Department of Ecology, and this project oversees the 324 building and PUREX. So I will start with a little bit of discussion about PUREX. As far as the permitting goes, specifically for Rev 9, PUREX is separated into two closing unit groups. Closing unit group 25, which is the PUREX plant, the main cleaning facility, and the tunnels, and closing unit group 33, tanks P4 and TKP4 and TK40. In 8C, the tunnels and tanks are currently permitted, but the canyon building is being added into Rev 9A as a closing unit group. Most of the PUREX complex is being closed under coordinated closure, which Joseph will go into more detail on that when he discusses 324 building. As far as PUREX facility, the plutonium uranium extraction plant, which is affectionately known as PUREX, operated to support primarily post-World War II and Cold War era nuclear fuel reprocessing. This facility used chemicals such as tributyl phosphate and nitric acid to recover uranium, plutonium, and neptunium from spent nuclear fuel at Hanford. By 1958, PUREX processed 79% of the total plutonium output from the site, which led to the eventual shutdown of Hanford's other plutonium processing facilities, and this facility's efficiency was crucial during the Cold War. PUREX was the fifth of the 5 chemical processing plants that were built on the Hanford site, and it is located near the center of the site known as the Central Plateau. The plant is approximately 1,000 feet long, 104 feet high, with approximately 40 feet below ground and 62 feet wide. The main portion of the facility, Alba Canyon, is approximately 860 feet long and contains 11 separate areas or cells designed to manage each step in the chemical process. During its operating life, PUREX supplied about 2/3 of the plutonium produced by the U.S., and it is currently in surveillance and maintenance mode, which requires inspections to ensure safety and security as it awaits the next phase of preparing for demolition. The closing unit group 25 also includes the 2 tunnels. They were constructed during the 50s and 60s to house the contaminated equipment that was removed from the PUREX processing areas. They are located to the south of the PUREX building, and all items that were placed in there must be handled remotely due to high levels of radiation. The first tunnel was built in 1956 and sealed in 1965. This tunnel holds 8 rail cars, and the second tunnel was built in 1964 and holds waste in 28 rail cars. In May of 2017, a partial cave-in occurred on the south side of PUREX Tunnel 1. There was no known release during the incident and no injuries occurred as a result, but the partial cave-in was caused by a failure of the roof timbers. So to prevent further collapse, the tunnel at 1 was filled with 53 truckloads of sand and soil, and the collapsed portion was covered with a high-density polyethylene cover to prevent infiltration, and they engineered a plan for long-term stabilization. By fall of 2017, Tunnel 1 was filled with an engineered grout to provide a high level of stability and protection of human health in the environment without precluding future remedial actions. Tunnel 2 was also grouted as a way to prevent it from suffering a future collapse. And this grouting was completed in May of 2019. And now I'll turn it over to Cian Muir, who is our permit lead for the PUREX tanks TKP4 and TK40 to discuss more of those. Oh, I forgot we had this slide in here. Yes, this is the route being added to Tunnel 1, just to kind of give you an idea of what that process was like.
Hi, I'm Fian Muir. I will be talking about PUREX tanks TKP4 and TK40 today. So the waste site where PUREX tanks TKP4 and TK40 was located is in the PUREX plant located in the 200 East area of the Hanford site. These tanks were located on the southeast corner of the 203A acid storage area. Tank TKP40 was on the southeast corner, and tank TK40 was located in the northeast corner of the 211A chemical storage area. Tank TKP4 was used to store uranyl nitrate hexahydrate, which resulted from PUREX fuel reprocessing operations. Uranyl nitrate hexahydrate is a water-soluble yellow uranium salt. Tank TK40 was used to store radiologically contaminated tributyl phosphate, which is an organic solvent, and that just means that it's a carbon-based liquid that can dissolve and disperse other substances. Both tanks stored processed chemicals during PUREX facility operations, and they have been drained, flushed, and deactivated to meet Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, RCRA, clean closure requirements. And any secondary containment and associated piping was also removed in this process. If you could go to the next slide, please, so folks can see what it looks like now versus what it used to. Thank you. So as you can see from the images, that tanks TKP4 and TK40 were removed between October of 2023 and April of 2024. Sampling after tank removal confirmed that closure standards were not met, and as a result, the RCRA closure of TKP4-TK40 will be rolled into coordinated closure with the CERCLA Unit 200 CP1. The waste site will be added to the list of 200 CP1 waste sites, and the remedial decision will determine if additional closure actions will be performed and will include the development of a post-closure plan to address any residual waste. If you are looking at the images, you can see that there are other tanks also stored in this area, and you can see that tanks TKP4 and TK40 are pointed out. You may be asking yourself, what about all these other tanks? How were they closed? Those other tanks and the 203A and 211A storage areas were closed under a CERCLA removal action and were not subject to RCRA regulations. Thank you. That concludes what I have to say. I think we are ready for Joseph to take over.
Hello, I am Joseph Lippold. I'm a unit supervisor with ecology and the 324 building DWMU's permit lead. So the 324 building is located in the 300 area of the Hanford site, just north of Richland. It was built between 1964 and 1966 for chemical and engineering studies, such as waste characterization and immobilization, waste remediation and cleanup development, biomass research, spent fuel characterization, tritium development, and cesium chloride encapsulation. The waste left over from these studies is what is contained inside the 324 building DWMUs. But none of the DWMUs are currently operating or accepting mixed waste. Then a little bit of a note about the difference between the 324 building DWMUs and the 324 building cleanup. So while the 324 building as a whole is undergoing cleanup and demolition under TPA milestone requirements, this draft renewal is applicable to only areas in the 324 building which have been determined to be storing dangerous or mixed waste. These are the B cell and D cell in the radiochemical engineering cells, also known as the REC, as well as the high-level vault and low-level vault, and the tank systems within those vaults and their associated ancillary equipment and piping, which also run through the REC. So as part of closure, the 324 building DWMUs will be filled with grout to remove void spaces and prevent release of contamination. They will then be cut up and removed as monoliths and are planned for disposal at the Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility, also known as ERDF. Then another note about the status of permitting for the 324 DWMUs prior to inclusion in the Rev 9A draft. In 2016, the permittees submitted a Class 2 permit modification request to Ecology for the addition of the 324 building DWMUs to the Hanford Sitewide Rev 8C permit. Then after review of the permittee's proposed Class 2 permit modification request, and during the public comment period for that Class 2 modification, Ecology reclassified the permit modification to a Class 3. However, due to timing of the Rev 9A permitting process, Ecology chose to integrate the 324 building DWMUs with the Revision 9A renewal rather than moving forward with the Rev 8C Class 3 modification. But public comments from the permittee's comment period for that modification are addressed by Ecology in the response to comment document issued with the Rev 9A comment responses. And then another note on the closure plan for the 324 building is they will be closing under a coordinated closure plan. So coordinated closure plans ensure that record DWMUs that are also part of CERCLA cleanup sites have closure activities and requirements that are consistent with their CERCLA cleanup requirements. The RECRA permit contains unit-specific permit conditions that reference TPA milestones. These milestones ensure and require that when the CERCLA documents are finally completed, the RECRA permit be modified to update the applicable closure activities and closure performance standards in the unit's closure plan. As such, the 324 building DWMU's closure activities are based on and directly reference the CERCLA cleanup documents associated with the unit. And then after closure activities have been completed, Ecology will determine whether closure performance standards have been met and if any further closure activities will be required. And can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, then a little bit on the event in B cell. So during clean out of B cell in 2009, a hole was discovered in the stainless steel sump liner, which you can see in the picture on the left in the upper right corner. This prompted concerns that radiological contamination may have been released to the environment from the failed sump liner. In 2010, the floor was stabilized with the addition of grout, which you can see on the picture on the right. And then in 2011, probes placed in the soils underneath B cell confirmed that a release had in fact occurred. And in 2012, a soil sample of the contaminated soil was retrieved and analyzed, confirming the soil contamination was high activity, low level radioactive waste. The contaminated soils beneath the building, however, did not designate as a dangerous waste. The contaminated soils then became the 300-296 waste site, and the record of decision, or ROD, established the 300-296 waste site as a principal threat waste site that requires remediation. So following removal of the 324 building and removal or remediation of the 300-296 waste site contaminated soils, the remaining soils will be sampled and analyzed to determine that the closure performance standards have been met. And that's all I have on 324.
There we go. Now it's my turn. Thank you, Joseph. So I just want to remind everybody that you can see these baseball cards on our Hanford Sitewide Permit page. Our comment period is open until October 27th. You can make comments on our e-comment site. You can email us at hanford@ecy.wa.gov. We have upcoming public hearings at the end of September. You can give us oral testimony, and you can always mail or hand deliver to our actual office at 3100 Port of Benton Boulevard. And let's see if we can get it today. Yay! So questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we will call on you. Oops, that wasn't supposed to go there. There we go. Ta-da! So thank you guys. You did a great job. Let's see. And in the chat, I have to catch up the chat. I couldn't see the chat while you guys were talking. So Maya Burke asked, where did the tanks go? This is for Fane.
Yes, I can answer that. So they and the ancillary equipment associated with them, the piping, the retaining walls, all of that stuff was chopped up and disposed of at Erdith.
Okay, and then Jane told us that our red arrow is pointing to the wrong place, so thank you. We will work on that. And then we have a question. What was the reasoning for including the TK40 and TKP4 impacted soils post demolition in a groundwater operable unit when there are other source operable units associated with PUREX?
I would just say that 200 CP1 is not a groundwater operable unit. I believe it is just the PUREX facility. It's associated with the PUREX facility. I don't know. And so we pulled the tanks in to include them with that facility.
They responded, appreciate that, misheard 200 ZP1 and not CP1. Apologies. Thank you. And then Hanford challenge, can you pull up a permit condition that shows how the permit protects workers, the public, and or the environment for the 324 building? Let me go over to our permit page. Give me just a moment here. Joseph,
Yes,
you have...
I'll just kind of start off by saying, so for the 324 building, the permit conditions primarily reference the closure plan. So,
okay. So is there not a specific one I can pull up, or
it would be primarily for the 324 building. It references out to the closure plan. So you could pull up the closure plan.
Give me just a second to get there. It's quite a bit of clicking to get in there. Let's see, find him. There he is. Here's your plan. Okay, let me share my screen again so you guys can see what I'm seeing.
And off the top of my head, I think a good example would be there's training requirements listed in the closure plan, which spell out, more around worker safety.
I think I saw those on page 24, Dana.
20, okay.
Or that one, I think. Up a little bit.
A little bit.
I think that right there, if that's right, Joseph. So if that's what you're thinking of.
Yeah, I don't know if I can read off of it, but just in general, I'd say that those training requirements are meant for worker safety and environmental safety in mind, and really the whole closure plan is. But there's also inspection and security requirements which prevent entry into that unit, which prevents unauthorized entry, so worker safety and spread of contamination. So that would also be in the interest of protecting the environment.
And additionally, on that same document, I was looking at it too, Dana, that if you also scrolled beyond that first page, there was a couple pages with some tables that listed training course requirements and some other things too, that if that helps answer your question, Hanford Challenge.
Very good training there. Okay. Love a good example. Examples are always handy. So do we have any other questions? You can put it in the chat, you can raise your hand.
I'm Joyce Hollingstead, and I am so sorry. I cannot find a hand raise function on my computer. But is it okay to go ahead with the question?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so am I understanding the picture with the tanks and then they were removed? Someone asked what happened to them, and say again, they were cut up and taken away? Help me understand.
Yes. So they were cut up and the ancillary equipment was removed, like the piping and the containment, like the concrete berm on the exterior of the tanks was cut up and removed at and disposed of at ERDF, ERDF.
And
And
that stands for the Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility, Joyce. It's a landfill on the Hanford site.
okay, so it's a disposal facility on Hanford site?
Yes, that's correct.
Uh-huh. And so these other tanks, did any of them have radioactive material in them?
Jane, do you know the answer to that one?
I do not work on our CERCLA units. I only work on our RCRA units. So, yes, it looks just on a little preliminary search, it looks like some of the other tanks did store radioactive materials.
And so when they were just put into this disposal facility, how were they treated being radioactive? How are they disposed?
That's a really good question. So, as part of the disposal process, the tanks are essentially flushed out and the heel is pumped out of them. And then the constituents themselves would be tested for. So, that's a really good question.
Okay, so flushed out, and that flushed out material would go where?
The flushed out material would also be covered under a CERCLA remedial action.
Okay.
Joyce, I would also say that if you put this in as a public comment, we can probably respond with more detail, but it's not in the RCRA closure plan for the other tanks are not included in that.
Okay, so um so I'm just, concerned that they're being handled in a way that it won't cause radioactive contamination to other parts of the Hanford Reservation or be in our environment for years to come.
I think Mia, Dan, I'll get to you in just a second here. I think Mia has a follow-up on that as to where does the flushed out material go and where is it disposed?
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie, I also saw you had your hand raised if you had any insight you wanted to share.
Yes, this is Eddie Holbrook with Ecology. To kind of come off of what Michelle had said. So there's two separate actions taking place within those tank systems, right? So the ones that with the red arrows are pointing to the subject of this permit, and specifically are tied to the closure plans that you can view in the materials that we had put out for public comment. The other tanks that were removed and disposed of um, occur much like the rest of the demolition that occurs in the Hanford site, right? So they are covered under CERCLA record of decisions, where they decide on how they're going to clean up a particular area. And in this particular case, we're talking about tanks and ancillary equipment. Regarding your concerns about this, contaminated other parts of the Hanford site, The environmental restoration disposal facility is a landfill on the Hanford site that takes in a lot of the waste that's covered under CERCLA. And in this particular case, debris, as those tanks were demolished, the debris from those tanks met the acceptance criteria to be disposed of at the environmental restoration disposal facility, also known as a landfill, one of many landfills that are authorized on the Hanford site to manage both low level radioactive waste and low level radioactive mixed waste. So the materials were demolished and sent to this landfill that is authorized to accept waste. You won't find the environmental restoration disposal facility in our permit because it is a CERCLA landfill that is led by our partner's Environmental Protection Agency, is overseen by the Environmental Protection Agency. They are the lead regulatory authority for that.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
And Eddie, to Mia's question, it was a bit of a follow-on question to the same topic about the flushed out materials. Do those go to ERDIF, or do those go to like some of the effluent treatment facilities, or do you have any idea, or others if others know the answer?
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Eddie.
Sorry. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just going to say, I looked up in the CERCLA documents real quick, and it does mention that the materials that were flushed and drained, any chemical inventory that could still be used was drained from the tanks and shipped off site. And then waste chemicals were drained and disposed of in the DST system, the double shell tanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for all that. So let's go to Dan. You have your hand raised very patiently. What's your question?
On the 324 building, when they found that heavy concentration of cesium, are they taking measures to protect that area from atmospheric rivers? I think with the climate change going on, it's going to head up there to you folks.
You're referring to the release from the B cell underneath the 324 building?
Yes.
Yeah. So the last time I checked, there hasn't been any contamination found outside of the footprint of the 324 building. So they're not super concerned at the moment about any precipitation driving that further into the soil.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, do we have any other questions? Again, you can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Okay, been having a good talk today. Was somebody saying something? It came through very garbled. Okay. Well, if nobody else has any other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. We have another Lunch and Learn next Wednesday that'll be on tanks. If you think of questions after we're done, go ahead and email us at hanford@ecy.wa.gov. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon.